It's time for lefties losing it. And as we barrel towards a US presidential election, the dial has turned up on the partisan crazy, and it is coming from absolutely all directions. In the aftermath of former President Donald Trump being shot, this is what the president of the American Federation of Teachers had to say.
It is seldom a dramatic event or attack that lets fascism in the door. The violence comes later, after they are voted in. Voting is still our best defense against tyranny and fascism, and it's our best offense to create the better future we dream of and march for. Progress is possible, but not guaranteed. When the history books are written about this moment, let them record that we the people united, mobilized, and voted down this existential threat to democracy and freedom, that we continued the march for progress, that we laid the foundation for a better future, and that we sought to create a more perfect union. Progress is possible. Keep marching.
Hardly softening political discourse in the aftermath of an attempted political assassination. And if that isn't an advertisement for homeschooling, then I'm not really sure what is. Now, moving on to Kamala Harris, who many are saying will be the Democratic nominee, it's fascinating to see how the lefty media has ditched old Joe, jumping headfirst onto the Kamala train.
I'm jumping out of my seat over here watching this. I think people have been thirsting for this.
And I'll just say this, you know, and I'm with Tim. I'm jumping out my seat higher than you, my brother. I'm just going to say that.
There was a twinkle in her eye. There was a kick in her step that, you know, when you're vice president, you know, you're not loose. You can't, you know, there's somebody above you. There's somebody, you don't want to overshadow them. And this was quite the coming out. And I got chills when she said, Donald Trump, I know your type. I was blown away. I was like, I kind of fell in love with her. I thought she was smart, engaging. She's funny, feisty, twinkle in your eye, punch you in the gut. I mean, everything you kind of want. And I just thought it was a great, great opening act.
She looked completely comfortable tonight with the words she was speaking. They felt organic and genuine.
Are we even living on the same planet? And of course, a switch in the Democratic nomination wouldn't be complete without some blame landing with the Republicans. Apparently, it's racist to suggest Harris is a DEI hire.
Republicans have gone so far as to call her a DEI hire, which is flat out racist.
This is a pretty unusual allegation, given I thought it was one of the few accepted facts on both sides of the aisle. After all, no one has accused Kamala Harris of being competent. But let's dial up the crazy a bit further. Apparently, mispronouncing her name is a hate crime.
I've heard from inside Republican circles and right-wing media that the hate campaign against Kamala Harris has begun. You'll notice they purposefully pronounce her name wrong. They say Kamala. They do it all the time. It is on purpose. But the talk is to start that hate campaign and get it going and start it churning.
And over recent days and hours, more people are coming out to endorse Kamala Harris. The Clintons, Nancy Pelosi. Then there is Meghan Markle, who reportedly wants to endorse Kamala Harris as well. Meghan is so lacking in self-awareness that she doesn't realise that her endorsement is probably more like a kiss of death. Perhaps just send her some strawberry jam and stay mum. And while the Democrat political establishment is getting used to the idea of presidential nominee Harris, this bloke thinks the presidential nominee should be trans.
I think we need a transgender president. And here's why. There is no greater struggle than being trans. You're constantly hated. You're constantly... people want to unalive you just because of who you are. If we had transgender president, the world would be a much better place. And maybe all our haters might actually leave the United States instead of staying here. We, the people, run this country, not our presidents, not our congressmen, not our Senate. Our Constitution says, we the people. So, maybe, who's with me? We need a transgender president. I'm up for it. Anybody else? Who's going to be a candidate?
Who knew a presidential election, a change of nominee and an attempted assassination could produce so much insane material? Anyway, there you have it. Joining me now is the author of international bestsellers, including The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, and his latest book, The War on the West, Douglas Murray. It's been a huge week in US politics, and just when I thought an assassination attempt on a former president would be the end of it, it turns out it was just the beginning of the wheels coming off. Obviously, Biden's resignation didn't just happen. Do we know what went on behind the scenes and what ticked him over?
We very much know what happened behind the scenes now. It's almost a month since Joe Biden had that catastrophic debate performance opposite Donald Trump. And many people thought that the whole idea of the Democrat ticket agreeing to a debate so early, so far ahead of the election, might have been an effort by some of the Democrats to actually show the world what they all secretly turn out to have known, which is that Joe Biden was far from firing on all cylinders these days. That fact that was known by readers of certainly conservative media seems to have come as a great shock to some of the Democrats and certainly a lot of their supporters. And so in the weeks since, there has been an effort, first of all privately and then increasingly publicly, among senior Democrats to signal to Joe Biden, it's time to leave. It's very interesting. In the days before Sunday, there was a growing public set of statements by Democrats, all sort of saying that Joe Biden wasn't fit to X, Y, Z. The minute that he released this strange statement on X, formerly known as Twitter, on Sunday, the moment he released that, suddenly now all the Democrats are saying Joe Biden is the best of us. He's a true hero. This is what leadership looks like, and so on. But yes, all the people who are currently praising Joe Biden were, of course, the people who were busily pushing him out in recent days. It's Nancy Pelosi, it's Chuck Schumer, and many others. The whole leadership of the Democrat Party realized that they were running a candidate, frankly, totally unfit for the office. It was perfectly clear he couldn't perform the task. He couldn't stay awake on television very easily. No way he was going to run the country for another 4 years, although it does raise the question of exactly who's running it now. And the answer is, we don't know.
And that's the point, I suppose. He may have dropped out as the nominee, but he's still actually the president. And that said, he's cancelled a number of engagements this week and has extended his trip in Delaware. We also understand that despite confirmation by his doctor, he only has mild COVID symptoms. So what on earth's going on here?
Well, the COVID symptoms might be mild, but none of the other symptoms are. It's, as I say, just increasingly obvious to people, and in the whole slew of news that came out in the last month, just perfectly obvious that this was not a candidate at 81. Some 81-year-olds might be sprightly, but Joe Biden isn't among them. It became perfectly obvious he wasn't going to be able to last for another 4 years. Of course, as you say, I mean, there's still half a year almost for him to go, for him to be running the most important country in the world. But there are so many questions now, and those people who think that this has been a sort of lovely sort of crowning of Kamala Harris as his successor, I think there might be a bit more pain to come from within the party, because not everyone in the Democrat hierarchy is absolutely sure that Kamala is their winner in November.
No, but Kamala Harris has told a rally in Wisconsin that she has enough support to secure the Democratic nomination. Here she is announcing it.
So, Wisconsin, I am told as of this morning that we have earned the support of enough delegates to secure the Democratic nomination.
But here's Representative Chuck Schumer's rather awkward announcement, I think, backing Kamala.
So now that the process is played out, from the grassroots bottom up, we are here today to throw our support behind Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm clapping. You don't have to.
Douglas, the Democrats seem, I think, more resigned to the fact that Kamala will be the nominee rather than excited about it, don't you think?
Well, I mean, it's hard to see who could be excited about it. Simply on a polls level, in the prospective polls of how people think they might vote in November, Donald Trump was already beating Joe Biden by 2 points. In most polls, he's already beating Kamala Harris by 5 points. So I don't know who would be especially excited about this. Kamala is obviously very excited about it and is going to show her enthusiasm in that normal, usual, and completely non-fake way she has of expressing enthusiasm for things, principally herself and her own words. But she might be enthusiastic, but it's hard to see who else is. I watched a speech of hers that she gave last Thursday in North Carolina, and to say that the content of it was vapid is to enormously sort of praise her, really. There's almost no banality that she cannot come out with. And what is her vision? It's a sort of sub-Obama rhetoric with absolutely no detail added onto it. And it's not clear what she wants to do other, of course, than to go forwards in time rather than backwards in time, which is something she's especially passionate about.
But Douglas, do the Dems actually have another choice? Is there actually another viable option at this point so late in the race?
Well, it would have to be a really stunning household name. There are a couple that are being thrown around, but how likely they are to do anything, I don't know. The enormous selfishness actually of Joe Biden and Jill Biden and the Biden family in keeping Biden pretending he was going to run until last Sunday. The selfishness of it actually is that if he'd have said, say, a year ago, look, I've done my spell in office, I've done everything I can, I'm in the twilight of my years, and it's time for next generation to come along. There could have been at least a year for Democrat candidates to put themselves forward, put forward their perspectives for leadership, have an open debate among themselves, and for the best man or woman to win. But because Joe Biden hung on with such clenched fingers onto the presidency, the fact that Jill Biden egged him on even when she must have did see, that he couldn't even walk onto a stage without a detailed map of the terrain, suggests that actually, these people who have been saying what patriots they are and so on have really mucked things up for their own political side, their own political party.
I don't think I could have put that better. But back to Kamala, and we have seen snippets of Kamala Harris over the course of the last 3 years. Very few of those snippets have been edifying, Douglas. Here she is as Senator applauding the idea of defunding the police.
Right now, what we're seeing in America is many cities spend over 1/3 of their entire city budget on policing. But meanwhile, we've been defunding public schools for years in America. We've got to re-examine what we're doing with American taxpayer dollars.
And here she is talking about eliminating private health insurance.
You support the Medicare for All bill, I think initially co-sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders. You're also a co-sponsor on it. I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it?
Well, listen, the idea is that everyone gets access to medical care. And you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval, going through the paperwork, all of the delay that may require. Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
And it doesn't stop there. She also agreed with the hard left representative AOC's push to eliminate cars in 11 years.
60 Minutes this weekend proudly calling herself a radical, and she's promoting policies like saying that every single carbon emission in the country, every car, should be eliminated within the next 11 years, everything from a 70 to 80% tax rate. Do you agree that she could possibly, in this ideology of the socialist left, could splinter your party?
No. I think that She is challenging the status quo. I think that's fantastic.
Douglas, you mentioned earlier the Obama talking points without the detail. Do we know what she actually believes in and whether and to what extent that would form part of any Democratic policy platform?
No, we have very little idea of what she believes in, actually, because she either says things like, that's why we need to have the conversation about that. That's one of her tricks whenever she gets into a corner where she really doesn't know what to say. And the rest of it, as I said earlier, are sort of banalities. This is somebody who, from the clips you just played, seems to think that they can answer the problems of education in America, of healthcare in America, of crime in America. But there's absolutely no meat on the bone. I mean, the idea is in that first clip that it's an either or in regards to policing or schooling. It's not a lack of money that's the problem in American schooling. It's a lack of decent teaching and a lack of discipline in the schools. There are American students in even the poorest states who have more money per pupil paid by the state for their education than in most countries around the world, and yet they still have some of the worst literacy and numeracy rates. And that's not a failing of funding, that's a failing of the teaching unions across America, among much else. Only Kamala Harris can present these complex problems, pretend the solution to them is simply more money, and promise to put more money everywhere, and make it not at all clear exactly how that money would be of any use. As I say, it's all vapid and empty rhetoric, and it's very unclear what she actually believes. She just says what she needs to say to get through the next 10 seconds of any interview or speech.
Which is going to be a huge problem if she, God forbid, turns out to be the president. But there's also been plenty of chatter about who her vice presidential candidate may be. A few suitors have started turning up, being very flattering about Kamala in the last couple of days. Where do you think this will land?
Well, I mean, it's actually not clear to me that the most talented people in the party are going to put themselves forward. Does Kamala Harris and, you know, your name on a ticket seem at the moment to be a good prospect for you if you're a Democrat, an ambitious Democrat? I think probably not. I think quite a lot of the people that people assumed would get into the race actually won't, if she is certainly the top of the ticket, because they would be the vice presidential running mate to a walking disaster. I mean, you know, we'll see. There's a long way to go. You know, in the next sort of almost 4 months, there will be, I mean, we've seen just the last week, you mentioned at the top of the show, that just the last week has been an unbelievable amount of things happening, from the attempted assassination of former President Trump to Joe Biden stepping out of the race on Twitter. So almost 4 months, absolutely anything can happen. But I just think that the Democrats are kidding themselves, but no one else, if they think that Kamala Harris is a strong candidate.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very, very fair call. And back to where this week kind of started, obviously with that attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Secret Service head Kimberly Cheadle she's finally stepped down overnight. This is, of course, following the Secret Service's total failure to protect the former President Donald Trump at that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. They had one job and they absolutely botched it. Here is what Speaker Mike Johnson had to say.
Our reaction, the immediate reaction to her resignation, is that it is overdue. She should have done this at least a week ago. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that she has heeded the call of both Republicans and Democrats. Now we have to pick up the pieces. We have to rebuild the American people's faith and trust in the Secret Service as an agency.
And it's no wonder she had to go, especially after that spectacle that was the questioning by the House Oversight Committee on Monday. Quite a sight to behold, both Democrats and Republicans calling for her resignation. But I think this was probably my favourite exchange of the hearing.
Would you agree that this is the most serious security lapse since President Reagan was shot in 1981 of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir, I would.
And, you know, do you know what Stuart Knight did when he was in charge at the time of the Secret Service? Do you know what he did afterwards?
He remained on duty.
He resigned. He resigned. What's the difference between your position and what Stuart Knight did?
What I will tell you, sir, is that I am dedicated to finding the answers to what happened. And like every Secret Service agent, we don't shirk from our responsibilities. I will remain on.
Douglas, the hubris that was on display at that hearing was absolutely extraordinary. Why on earth did it take so long for that reality to set in?
Well, I watched that hearing and came away with the view that, that the now former head of the Secret Service has clearly decided that her aim in the hearing was to say as little as possible whilst presenting herself as being as helpful as possible. She wouldn't answer even the most basic questions like, when did you start preparing for this hearing? She said things like, well, to the best of my recollection, or I can't recall, or and it was no skin off her nose if she'd have just said, you know, I started preparing the moment I heard, which was 6 days ago, or whatever. She seemed to be intent on not giving any details in case she could somehow be tripped up on them at some later date in the hearing or afterwards. And that was just a disastrous tactic. She was repeatedly asked about timelines, and it turned out she didn't have them. It really was an embarrassment. You know, she was a political appointee of Joe and Jill Biden, was apparently close to them and respected and liked by them when she was in charge of then Vice President Biden's security detail. She obviously was not the right person for this job. She certainly wasn't the right person to represent herself in front of a congressional hearing. And I think it's probably very good that she goes, or she's gone. That said, there is an enormous amount that still needs to be found out and interrogated about exactly what did happen that day at the Trump rally, because there's so many security failings that we now know that have come out. And as I said last week, this is, you know, the world was just too close by a couple of millimeters from something utterly catastrophic happening.
Absolutely, and it's very fair that representatives on both sides of the aisle want to know what happened, because obviously they are all in danger if the Secret Service isn't doing what it needs to be doing. Now, one last topic, and we know Benjamin Netanyahu is in the US to meet with the government in relation to the ongoing war in Gaza. It's been reported that Kamala Harris is going to boycott Netanyahu's address, but that's not all. Apparently, pro-Palestinian protesters have invaded the Capitol building. If this wasn't so serious, Douglas, it would just be the most epic political satire.
Well, yes, but I mean, it is very serious because, I mean, here we see a very important relationship for America and Israel being put under strain, not by these nincompoop protesters. I mean, they should all just be, you know, arrested as anyone else would be if, say, they broke into the Capitol building. But the thing that's putting strain on it is that decision by current Vice President Harris not to preside over the session. I think she's speaking to a high school somewhere in Vermont or something at the time when she could be presiding at that joint session. Clearly, she is making this more of a political point than it needs to be. There has actually always been a great bipartisan agreement in the US on the importance of the American-Israeli relationship. I'm sure that Prime Minister Netanyahu will speak to that when he speaks on Wednesday, and we'll see. But it is a snub actually by Kamala Harris, and a very bad sign. Netanyahu is also meant to be meeting Joe Biden to express his thanks for Joe Biden's support since October, but it's not even clear if that's going to happen because it's not clear if Biden's well enough to meet him, it seems. So that, according to reports today. So we'll see. But, you know, it should be an important time for America and Israel to re-emphasize the strength of that relationship. And if it is politicized by Kamala Harris and others, it'll be to the detriment of both countries and a lamentable situation which should never have arisen.
No, and I think there's plenty more to come out in the wash there. Thank you so much, Douglas Murray.
Great pleasure. Thank you.